Alright, so, guys, let me ask you this. If we have x squared equals 16, how do you solve for x? Take the square root, right? Alright, so we take the square root of x squared, and when we do the one side, do the other, correct? And therefore we get x is equal to 4. Pretty simple, right? Alright, go down to the next line. If I had the square root of x equals 11, now what do? Square both sides. So x is equal to. Alright, now keep this really simple here. What did the square root do to the square? No, seriously, you guys, I want you to think mathematically for a minute here. What does the square do to the square root? Cancels it. What does the square root do to the square? Cancels it. That's what we call inverses. When one thing cancels out another, they're inverses. What's the inverse of addition?
Subtraction.
What's the inverse of multiplication? Division. Okay. So we also have the same thing with functions. In Algebra 1, you guys should have learned something that looks like this. What is that called? F of x. The function in terms of x. And if I want to solve for x, the problem is that my x is trapped inside the function. So the only way to get the x out of the function is to cancel out the function. What we just said here. How do you cancel out the function? What do you have to use? What's that new word we were going to talk about today? You have to use the inverse. And the way that we notate the inverse is with a -1 as the exponent. So you take the negative, or basically the inverse function, and our result is x. The inverse function cancels the function. So, if I tell you that the tangent of x is 3/4, and I'm asking you to solve for x, the problem is, where's x right now? It's inside the tangent function. I can't divide by tangent because it's not tangent times x. It's the tangent of x. It's a function. So the only way to get rid of it is to use the inverse function. So to cancel all functions, you have to use the inverse function. And that's when you guys look at the calculators, you'll see that symbol. And that means inverse tangent. Inverse sine, inverse cosine. Okay? As you move into calculus, you'll call these arctangent, arcsine, and arccosine. But that's not something we need to worry about here. Right now, I want to make sure we're referring to them as inverse functions. So, how does this actually work? Well, on the calculator, you let the calculator do all the work for you. Do not do this by hand. There are geniuses before our time who got to do it by hand, and they somehow managed to get shuttles back and forth to the Earth, got capsules back and forth to the Earth, and somehow managed to get 3 men back inside a capsule that was running on the same thing as your wristwatch out of the 1980s. Apollo 13 ran on the same amount of energy as a digital wristwatch. Geniuses. Now you were
Why
on.
don't we do that now?
Wow, thanks.
Instead of wasting all the.
Well, you know, whatever. So, what we need to do is we basically take the inverse function of what we have. So since we're using tangent, to get rid of tangent, what do you use? Take the inverse tangent. But what I do to one side, and to the other. So if I put that in my function, I also have to put this into the function. As we already set up here, the inverse undoes the function, and we get the inside coming out. So therefore, the tangent inverse of the tangent, what's going to happen here? It's going to cancel it out, and we're left with x, tangent inverse of 3 or 4. And that's how you solve for angles. You set up the ratio, and then you take the inverse trig. Then look at example 14. What do I have? Okay, tell me how I would set up a trig function and solve the problem. What is? Sine of what? Yeah, sine of x equals 5/12. How do I solve for my angle? Not times it. You take the inverse sine. So x is the inverse sine of 5/12. And that's what you put in the calculator. You'll get your answer. Divide. All right, take a look at number 15. Who wants to try number 15? No. How about you do that? Actually, that's a great lesson. Why don't you do that? Oh, that's fine. Let's try number 15 together. Okay, so Alexis, what do I have relative to my angle on number 15? Think about the three sides: adjacent, opposite, or hypotenuse. What do I have on number 15? So which trig function is that? Yeah. So the cosine. So how do I set that up?
X equals 60.
Yes. So therefore x is equal to
The
inverse cosine of. We got this?
You guys like solve?
Yeah, you're gonna. I want a decimal approximation after that.
Wait, what do you do?
So,
Do something cosine. And then
Yeah. So if you guys are using the inspires, you hit the trig, and then you'll see the negative ones, the inverses underneath the normal one.
would you put divided by 20? Would you put
Divided by 20.
30, 16, yeah, that's it. Did you your answer?
So do we set our answer equal to x, or do
Yes.
we just put cosine?
Equals x.
What do you find?
You're dividing 16 by 20.
Oh, that's it?
That's it.
You don't use a little negative?
Well, no, the calculator will do that for you.
See those right there?
Okay. So you're gonna go 16. All right, guys, that's it.